Oh yeah, okay. You good? Yeah. Okay. So there's a couple of things we want to do today, but what I wanted to show you very quickly, I don't know if we'll have a chance to use it, but maybe you will, is so Ethos app, which is an app that I and my students use to gather data on all sorts of projects. Basically what we do, if you think about the inspiration phase, where you try and go and find out about something. With Ethos app, what you do is you recruit people, students or whoever you're interested in, and you ask them to do certain things, to go capture some photos, to capture some clips, to interview people, to write a narrative, whatever. And so they go and do the data collection, and that you can then analyze it. So when I asked you to sign up, I created a project called I created a project called How Might We Improve Health in Everyday Life, which is here. And when you have downloaded the app and you've signed in, you will have a project in there that asks you to do certain things. So that's how it works, and it's what's called digital ethnography, basically, in an applied sense. I have other tools that are similar to this, but with those other tools, I gather the data. I'm the researcher, and it organizes that information. And that's for research purposes, not applied purposes. This is for applied purposes. So if I take, just to show you an example, so inside the system where I am here, I've got a bunch of projects. This is a project, similar one that I did in Germany a few years ago when I was first teaching this. So if you look inside the project here online, so we were looking at coffee culture in this town, Aachen, where I travel quite often. There's a university there. And in Aachen, I had half a dozen people gathering data for me. Each of those elements there is a data item that came from their phone to this source. So I have, interviews or pictures in this particular space. So I'm not sure if it's going to run on that. Anyway, in the best world, all this data shows up here, and it's a mix of stuff with images and everything else. It's all about the topic, and then I analyze it with my research team, and we figure out what we're going to do. And sometimes I actually give the people that I'm working with, I give them access to this, so they can also participate in the analysis and design. So it's a tool for that. So I just thought I'd quickly introduce you to it, and you can we can look at, start maybe thinking about how to use that kind of thing. Okay, so in the context of in the context of design thinking, there are digital tools that allow you to gather the kind of data you need to gather. But let's talk specifically about prototyping. So prototyping in the design thinking method is the last stage of ideation. And the purpose of prototyping is to bring ideas to life quickly. So make them tangible in whatever way, get feedback, and continue to improve your concept. So, if you work in industrial design or similar areas, when people say prototyping, that usually means they spend hours and hours on some CAD program and invest a lot of time, money, and energy and prototype, the piece of machinery that they're doing or making. In design thinking, we're not doing that. We're aiming to do everything cheaply, quick, and getting it out there and testing it. So the picture actually that you can see there, which is one of the social enterprises that was set up by IDEO through design thinking, Smart Life. That particular picture there is when they were starting out. They set up one basic store with just a few items outside to see how people responded. So that picture there is not of the full business running. It was like a mock-up of what the store would look like. And so they get that together really quick. You've got a couple of signboards there, and then they had people coming on asking, what is this about? So you're trying to get a reaction from people to your idea. You're not trying to work out your idea in all its details and spend hours and days on that, because you don't want to be doing that if you're on the wrong track. So you keep it simple and you test it like that. So there are sort of steps in prototyping, if you like, and one way of looking at it is that we start with a storyboard. A storyboard is very similar to a scenario. In that game that we played before, we have a scenario, Armageddon or dystopia or whatever. A storyboard is just really a sequence of images, I suppose, that tells the story of the new innovation, how it looks, how people move through it, what you do. It's like a cartoon sort of narrative of the innovation story. Second is rapid prototyping, and the idea there, as you can see from the image, a telephone with rubber bands tied to a toothbrush. That's the kind of rapid prototyping we're talking about, because that gives us a basic idea about form. And so when we say quick and rapid and low cost and lo-fi, that's what we mean by prototyping. We want to get feedback, and then we want to integrate the feedback and iterate. So that's the prototyping process within design thinking. Storyboarding, that's sort of narrative, rapid prototype, get feedback, integrate and iterate. What I want you to do tomorrow when we come, we'll have some time to work on it today. So I want you to bring in prototypes, basic prototypes of this kind, of your idea, or elements of your idea. That can be the whole thing. And you want to get feedback from people in the room about, does that work? Do they understand it? Does it make sense? And that can be, like I say, that can be anything. That can include, for example, a business model as a prototype, as a draft. You want a reaction from people. That's the point. The point here isn't to make something that's worked out completely. It's to make your idea somewhat tangible so that people can react to it and say that you're on the right track or wrong track. That's the point. So it's not engineering or industrial design prototype. Neither is it architecture prototype. So it's often worth starting with a storyboard. Now, I've got the name of it now. I actually use, and a lot of my students don't actually go out and draw stuff. They just use software to mock up storyboards. And there's one piece of software called How-To. How, you know, How, like P-O-W, and then T-O-O-N, How-To. And that allows me to mock up a storyboard in about 5 minutes because it's like an animated, thing. So my students, if they're going to do an early prototype of their idea, they go to How-To, they spend half an hour or something, and they mock up the storyboard. So remember here that a storyboard is how a potential customer might interact with your idea. So we're talking about the future. We're talking about your idea realized. What does it look like from a customer, user point of view, moving through that? Yeah. So if it's an integrated, sustainable food production, sort of garden and cafe idea, I want to know what is that experience as a student when I walk into that and I go through. What does that look like? What does that look like? How does that work? Or if I'm doing anything else, if it's time management and health and whatever, then I want a picture of what is that like as a person? How does that go? What's the sequence? So you have to move your idea from sort of abstract bullet points into a storyline in which people are in scenarios, settings, and interact. Like I say, digital tools are quite a good way to do that. So what we do in class, for example, what I do in class, or if I'm working with industry, I'll have a workshop, for example, where we're working on some new innovation, and I've got a bunch of people in the room. There might be real estate agents and government people and students, a mix of people, and we're testing out a new idea. So there'll be tables around the room, and on the tables will be paper prototypes of the interface of the app. It'll probably be a sort of a sequence around the room that people go through, and I'm putting that stuff out there, and then there might be a shop. We do a basic, almost like theatre, right? If we're making up a new shop as an idea, as part of our idea, we'll do a pretend shop. There'll be a counter there, and somebody will be behind it, have a little sign up. People will go there and buy in the new way. Okay, or come there with a problem. So we have in our room, in our sort of testing room, we have a setup with these elements. This is exactly what IDEO does on a big scale. This is what Spark does at my clinic. When they have a new idea, they take a room in the hospital, they shift the furniture around, they put in bits and pieces, and then they bring patients and doctors through there. And they see how they go. How do they react? How does that work? And so you have a sort of project group. So starting with a storyboard is a really good idea, right? It puts it into and it's basic. Yeah? You can see this example here. We're not talking about every moment in the story, but the key moments in the story. Remember when we talked about service design, we looked at touch points. Yeah, in the emergency room. Yeah, so face to face, coming in and interacting with the information. And so touch points is actually a good way of deciding what boards, if you like, need to be visualized, because those are key moments in the process. That's your storyboard. Have a look at how to do that. The next is this, building rapid prototypes. So this is moving from the story to physical elements of the new project. Now, so my thing is, if we go and look at the innovation lab here, or I'm going to have a look at the IITG innovation lab on Friday. The way to test your idea, it'd be interesting to see whether they do this. The way to test your idea with the people you want involved is to give them something tangible to respond to before you go off and build it. So physical prototype, that first one there, is a prototype that IDEO was involved in for a surgery. There was an engineer and a bunch of other people sitting in the room, and they were trying to figure out a new way of. It was a piece of surgical equipment for the surgeons to kind of intervene at some point in the body there somewhere. They needed a new way. They wanted a new way of holding this. So they're all sitting around the table talking about this. And luckily, there happened to be a design thinker in the room, and they were listening and watching, and everybody was there. And they went out of the room quickly, and they came back with a marker pen, a cotton reel, and a peg, and some sellotape. They said, "Is this what you mean?" And that was the basic form of what they were looking for, and it was the start of the development of the device. You can read about the end story lots of places. So prototypes is physical, and prototypes can be digital, as you know. That just means I'll do a quick mock-up on here. I'll use whatever software I've got to make a rapid interface. It doesn't all work, bits and pieces work, or it's a wireframe, or a website, whatever. Something really basic. And then I put it in front of people. I don't work on it for hours and hours to make it perfect. It's the basic navigation. And I give it to people, and I say, does that make sense? Does it work? Whatever. So that's the digital. Environments, many of our innovations include an environment. An environment is just a space that's important. And we might want to be modifying the space because we're building something outside, or we're remodeling something inside. Either way, we're changing the environment. So we want to give people a sense of how does that environment look. So again, if I go to a lot of the banks in Australia, a lot of the big banks, the big four we call, they have very expensive rooms. They're fully tied up with technology, and they can create an environment for a new product or service really quickly. They put people in there, and they play out the whole scenario, and they gather all this data. So they prototype the environment with basic seating, and so it might be a new way of doing. I'll give you an example. I went to the bank. Actually, I went to the bank in my back in New Zealand, in my hometown. I needed to get something done, and I walked into this the bank. I forgot the English word. Whatever, the agency. And when I walked in, normally you go in and you see desks over here, and they've got little desks, and you're looking for the line you have to join. So I walk in, and so this is the ASB, or Savings Bank, and somebody had done a job on it because they had. I walked in, and you had sort of circular desks, a bit like a bar, all around the room, and with staff behind them. There were no lines. There were no window shelving. There were simply places where staff were with almost like high coffee table things, and you went and people were looking for you, they would help you at that sort of table scenario. People were sort of coming and going from those round tables. You know, I might take 5 minutes and then I'd go and somebody else would come along. So they reconfigured the whole space. And I've seen lots of examples of that. And they'll test that before they, build it. So you've got physical, digital environments, and then you've got services. We talked about service design the other day, and a service is usually in an environment, of course, but it's as you've seen, it's a sequence of touch points for an individual that follows a pattern. That's a service. And a service is typically, it has a human face, it has a technology face, and so on. So we can, so you can see here, this is a cut-out version. Again, this is Smart Life, a particular example of a new business. So they would prototype the service, meaning they get a room, they stack a few items behind, they have one up in front, they've got somebody standing there, and then they run through a simulation of the service. So you have to move beyond, when you really want to do this and make sure, you have to make it tangible enough that you really figure out whether you're on the right track. You don't do this and you stay at the level of abstract, you'll miss something and you probably will fail because you haven't thought about the physical, the human, the digital, the physical. You sort of missed. So you put that kind of thing together, you test, and you get feedback. Right? So prototypes in design thinking are a reason to have a conversation. They are not a resolution, a final resolution of an idea. They are a reason to have further conversation about whatever it is you're doing. So you want that, and you want to integrate the feedback that you get and iterate it. So what this means for you tomorrow is that you need to be able to bring in tomorrow any physical, digital environment, which could be a picture, or service-oriented visualization, prototype, or business model of your idea, and then you're going to put it in front of the other people in the room, and they are going to tell you if it makes sense, if it works, if they get it, and then you listen and modify it. And so that's the process. And as they say here, sometimes you can iterate on the fly. That's true, certainly with digital. If I've got a basic interface that I've mocked up using some app or something, if somebody tells me something while we're doing feedback, I can often just adjust it right there. I just pull off the item and go in. Sometimes you can iterate it on the fly. Other times, you're going to have to come back. So that's your task for tomorrow. Go build it or parts of it. And then tomorrow we will do a test and feedback. Okay? So as basic, it doesn't matter. For this exercise, it doesn't matter how basic this is. Just take some elements of your idea, turn them into something tangible, digital, physical, whatever, so that you could show them to somebody and they can respond to them. That's the important part. Questions? Yeah. All right. So I wanted to clarify that. And I wanted to show you that. Now let's cover the other. So we talked about wicked problems this morning, and their relationship to design and the theory of change. And so the other topic that I just want to talk about and get you to think about, because it's probably relevant, the topic for today is sustainability in design thinking. So I'm shifting now from practice to just, sort of theoretical thinking. So here are some questions, and maybe you can tell me what you think the answers are. By the way, there are several possibilities for design thinking, so not one truth. So is design thinking about sustainable solutions? What do you think? Sorry?
Yes.
Yeah?
Maybe not always.
Right. Because?
So, like the example of that hospital,
Yeah.
it was about improving the efficiency, not about sustainable development.
Right. Yeah. So,
That's because usually, but not always.
correct. Yeah. Let's say it's an ideal. Yeah. We'd like it to be sustainable. But yeah, design thinking isn't intrinsically about sustainable solutions. Now, sustainable development, which we sort of kind of touched on, but is balancing up environment and people's needs, more or less. Are sustainable development problems wicked? Are they all wicked? Right?
But then sometimes you can have the solution to
Yeah.
so then it cannot.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So they're complex. Now I'll tell you something. When we talked about the theory of change, we briefly touched on theory of change. We talked about the difference between it's probably true that most sustainable development problems are either they're usually not simple. They're at least complicated, complex, and sometimes big. So then when we the third question there is really a kind of rhetorical question, actually. If you look at design thinking projects anywhere, so for example, the slum redevelopment project or anything else, I always find that you can read off how sustainable it is. By which I mean you can look at it, look at what they're doing, and kind of figure out, okay, so you don't really care about the environment that much here, or you care more about employment. The fourth thing is, how do we embed sustainability considerations and solutions? How do we do that? This is a real question.
And will have a long, winding answer.
Okay.
It is not a yes/no question. It will have a long, winding answer.
Okay, what are some of the practical ways that we embed sustainability in projects?
Even when we are thinking of the solution, in the alternatives itself, we should come up with sustainable alternatives in the.
Okay.
That's how we can invent it.
Yeah, that's one way of doing it. Yeah, it's not actually a trick question.
Yeah, it's not a trick question. Also, I think this is the future. Like, we have to think of sustainable solutions now. We don't have a choice anymore. So,
Yeah.
So I think like, that has to be at the core of design thinking now, or any kind of endeavor that seeks to solve problems. That it has to have sustainability at its core, because we are just gleaning so much more from the planet than it can offer, or
Yeah. Yeah, we're dangerously on the edge.
Yes, we're dangerously like teasing the edge.
Yeah.
We might just go over. So
Yeah. Correct.
it has to be.
Yeah.
It has to be the guiding principle of design thinking.
Yeah.
Sustainability.
Yeah. I mean, and I think that's an important sort of point. I think it's because ultimately it's a position you take. You just kind of come into some project and you say, look, I'm sorry, but it's got to be, got to have this, it's got to have that. You just have to take a stand. Surprisingly, it's still something people debate. Just to sort of put it in context, some things that we all know. We've got the new agenda, for the Sustainable Development Goals for 2015, 2030, 2016, 2030. So these 17 goals and their sub goals and specifications. So I know that when we talk at the Centre for Social Initiative Management in Chennai, when we run courses on how to do social impact assessment, we often begin with this as a sort of a background basis. So that's a sort of a general background. And more specifically, everybody talks about the triple bottom line, or the three dimensions of people, planet, and profit, and that the crossover, is in the centre. We hope sustainability sitting there in the centre, where we balance those things up. Now, you probably know also that how you arrange those circles changes things. Because there's people who with good reason put profit in the middle, or at least business in the middle, as the smallest circle. People as the next circle, bigger, and planet as the biggest circle. And that's an issue of dependency. That's a claim about dependency. That claims that the planets, if we screw up the planet, the rest goes down the drain. If we screw up the people at a lower level, then the economy ends up being inequitable. So how we arrange the circles, changes things. At least for design thinking, one of the models that is quite popular as an interpretation of sustainability is the circular economy. So this idea that's I'm sure you've heard of and sort of floats around essentially says that we structure our economy Shall I carry on?
Yeah, please.
All right. We structure our economy so that the sort of both production, consumption, and the management of all that is tied closely to completely minimize waste. Zero waste is the ideal, and respects that dependency on the environment and people. So that's getting quite a lot of an area. And people like Andrews, who write about this, suggest that sustainable design thinking is a good way of doing circular economy at the project level. That's worth thinking about. Back in 2011, when I was writing about some of this stuff with friends, and relating some of those ideas to design, we talked about socially responsible design, which is in fact very similar to sustainable design. And we suggested that there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we suggested there were 8 criteria for something to be called socially responsible and ultimately sustainable. And our criteria were, because what we were trying to say in this particular article was that actually design and product in general is very much about just consumption. And so, if we're going to design responsibly in other contexts, we need to think about other criteria. So the first criteria was need. So as you know, a lot of stuff that gets made doesn't get made because somebody needs it. By need, I mean really needs, not want. So so the first criteria we suggested was need. We have a bunch of examples in that paper as well, in that co-design paper, where we take from different areas of the developing world, and we looked at how they failed and succeeded and things like that. So we evaluated innovations against these criteria. Suitability. Is it culturally appropriate? And I would rephrase that these days. If I can just hark back to the Maharashtra regional horror, using compressed earth bricks from Tamil Nadu in Maharashtra, in rural Maharashtra, was not suitable. It was a bad choice. They couldn't be fixed. They couldn't really be made without a whole lot of additional inputs, and they didn't actually fit either soil type or anything else. So that's not suitable. The third criteria we put up is relative affordability. So, can people actually afford this? Is it locally and regionally affordable? So, that was another criteria. Advancement we put in, and by advancement we meant, does it create local or regional jobs and develop new skills? So we're looking here at an ideal case. We want something that does more than just be another piece, another product. We want something that drives jobs and new skills. We want local control. We want usability. We want potentially empowerment if possible. If I think of the Barefoot College, idea of solar panels and older women, building those and taking them back to the village and running a business, and therefore changing the power dynamics of the village, then that's an example to me of empowerment. So in an ideal world, we're wanting to produce something that changes the dynamics. And then the last criterion we put in was dependency. So if a product is brought in and it can only be fixed or replaced from the US or Hong Kong or something else, then that just creates dependency that is not socially responsible. So so that was us talking about some of these issues and putting some of those criteria together. And of course, on a sort of bigger scale, on a bigger scale, and Inga Westelacker, who's in TU Delft, she spent a bit of time on this idea of design for development, which is a kind of further development of some of these ideas. And so her idea, which kind of expands somewhat on ours, is that the things that you design should increase the freedoms that people have to live valuable lives, which is really, amartya sense. development. It's pretty. So, that's the sort of big picture stuff that we like to think we contribute something to. So when we're doing, when we're looking at sustainability and design thinking, we can always ask, when we look at projects or we think about our own projects, we can always ask, how deep does this go? And back in 2015, I wrote that there was a book we put some friends with Germany we put together called Transformation Design, and I talked about design for sustainable development. Some of these issues that we're talking about here, and so the notion here was that things like recycling, life cycle analysis, design for sustainability, these are all good methods, but of themselves, they're not enough to create sort of deep sustainability. So, useful, but we need to go beyond that. Let's just see if we can, for those of you who haven't been exposed to some of these ideas, will also mean that I don't have to talk from. Have a look at, first of all, here's quite a nice short presentation on what we mean by the circular economy. Let's take this as
have been around for a few billion years and will be around for many more. In the living world, there's no landfill. Instead, materials flow. One species' waste is another's food. Energy is provided by the sun. Things grow, then die, and nutrients return to the soil safely. And it works. Yet as humans, we've adopted a linear approach. We take, we make, and we dispose. A new phone comes out, so we ditch the old one. Our washing machine packs up, so we buy another. Each time we do this, we're eating into a finite supply of resources and often producing toxic waste. It simply can't work long term. So what can? If we accept that the living world's cyclical model works, can we change our way of thinking so that we too operate a circular economy? Let's start with the biological cycle. How can our waste build capital rather than reduce it? By rethinking and redesigning products and components and the packaging they come in, we can create safe and compostable materials that help grow more stuff. As they say in the movies, no resources have been lost in the making of this material. So what about the washing machines, mobile phones, fridges? We know they don't biodegrade. Here, we're talking about another sort of rethink, a way to cycle valuable metals, polymers, and alloys so they maintain their quality and continue to be useful beyond the shelf life of individual products. What if the goods of today became the resources of tomorrow? It makes commercial sense. Instead of the throw away and replace culture we've become used to, we'd adopt a return and renew one, where products and components are designed to be disassembled and regenerated. One solution may be to rethink the way we view ownership. What if we never actually owned our technologies? We simply licensed them from the manufacturers. Now, let's put these two cycles together. Imagine if we could design products to come back to their makers, their technical materials being reused and their biological parts increasing agricultural value. And imagine that these products are made and transported using renewable energy. Here we have a model that builds prosperity long term. And the good news is, there are already companies out there who are beginning to adopt this way of working. But the circular economy isn't about one manufacturer changing one product. It's about all the interconnecting companies that form our infrastructure and economy coming together. It's about energy. It's about rethinking the operating system itself. We have a fantastic opportunity to open new perspectives and new horizons. Instead of remaining trapped in the frustrations of the present, with creativity and innovation, we really can rethink and redesign our future.
All right, so that was a nice sort of summary of what we mean by circular economy. Essentially, the idea is copy nature. Bottom line is copy nature, and strategically build for recycling and everything else. And so, concepts like zero waste are related and linked to that. And within design, at least, we talk about cradle to cradle, C2C, as the approach to product development and innovation and sustainability. C2C says that we consider not just so cradle to grave, if you like, is build something and then toss it and it dies. Cradle to cradle suggests we come back around and we build products, with that in mind.
You may have heard of it, cradle to cradle. Perhaps you're wondering, what is that? Well, here's an explanation. About 160,000 years ago, the first Homo sapiens started to evolve into who we are now, consumers. In 1804, Earth hosted 1 billion people. Now we are moving towards 8 billion, with every day more than 200,000 people joining us on this planet. In modern culture, we are surrounded by commercial products that make our lives pleasurable and more convenient. So imagine there are 8 billion of us. This means mass production. Being able to produce all these products means we need resources and lots of them. But there's a problem. During all these years, we've kept on using resources, but using without thinking of reusing has led to this potential problem. The time will come that there will be resource scarcity sooner than most of us realize. And the other problem is waste. Most companies are still working with a take, make, waste industrial system. Carefully designed products are thrown away quicker than before. There's a clear need to react to these problems. Luckily, they are getting more and more attention from both companies and consumers. 2 strategies can be indicated. Firstly, the strategy to minimize. Use fewer materials, use less energy because of more energy-efficient technologies, and with that, reduce the carbon footprint. But this still only postpones the moment resources will be exhausted, and despite reductions, with an increasing world population, volumes keep growing. You could say this current approach is known as reuse, reduce, and recycle. And though this is a good start, it is only being less bad. Let me introduce strategy 2. Rethink the way we make things and use materials effectively. This is not about being less bad, but about becoming 100% good by improving quality. We can start working from a vision where waste equals food. This is what Michael Brangart and William McDonough have developed and named Cradle to Cradle. So while a good start is to reduce the consumption of materials and stimulate recycling and minimize the amount of energy used in a product life cycle, Cradle to Cradle is about keeping all materials in continuous cycles, stimulating the use of renewable energy only, and celebrating diversity.
I'll let you watch the rest of that. It's a good clip, and C2C is very close to circular economy, close loop, and all of the pretty much mainstream in design and architecture schools. Working in those part of although it's part of the discourse, actually doing it, of course, is harder than talking about it. But there's some good moves in that direction. So again, this thing, we said at the start, so design thinking solutions are not necessarily sustainable. They can, or they probably should be. And what we mean by that, depends how deep we go with this question of sustainability and development. How far do we go, and how can we integrate this into the projects and products that we make. And the case which is on the IDEO website of Brilliance is a case where there are elements of sustainability in there in terms of the bulbs that they used. They used LEDs instead of CFLs. So it's kind of just a product switch out. One was more efficient than the other. So that's a pretty basic sustainability move, but an example, and it's a continuum. So design thinking, kind of coming back to the questions, design thinking as a business innovation tool is not inherently about sustainability. Probably should be. It may incorporate environmental sustainability considerations. It may promote the double bottom line, social and environmental. Whether it promotes a triple bottom line is another question. Deep sustainability, whether through design thinking or anything else, requires an alternative politics and economics. And there are some models out there that can help us do that. So that is that. Questions or comments or fears?
Whoever is speaking, please.
If we do a project and if we do some project using design thinking,
Yeah.
and then we present it to someone,
Yeah.
and when they evaluate the project when it was done, it's like kind of a checklist where they say whether you did involving the users like co-creation, empathetic understanding, then bringing out something out of the box solution after the whole process, and then they will also check for sustainability in it. If you've done that, that means you've indeed done design thinking. If any of this is missing, it's not clearly design thinking. Is that it?
Yeah, there are a bunch of characteristics of design thinking that we expect to see, which we've been talking about this week. So they're either there or they're not. The question of sustainability, which you talked about today, is one that is not intrinsically, when you go and look at what's being done under that name, it's not always necessarily triple bottom line socially responsible design. So we can question that. Yeah. But that's a question that's not necessarily about design thinking method. It's more of a sort of political or ethical question. So do you think you know what you've got to do for tomorrow? Bring something in that other people in the room can react to that relates to what you're design. And if we can knock that off in the morning, get some feedback and inputs, then we can move on to talking about the implementation phase and what you would do next, David, pushing further. Yeah. I think one thing I did want you to do between now and tomorrow, because I mentioned it at the start, go to Canvas. If you go to the site, there is the so this link here on Ranganatha Nagara, the Islamic redevelopment, which is the blog of the design thinking project. It's got IFMR, and so here you've actually got a sort of a kind of a walkthrough of the of what was chosen to build through the process. So there's this article by Kumar and Mahalingam and so on and so forth in the set that talks about the early process, and this sort of basic 3D walkthrough shows what they came up with, what the people came up with, not the government. And you have through this in this blog, right? It starts way down here, starts down here with a kind of the early setting up, showing the existing situation, right? And then the beginning of a process of consultation, leading to a briefing, leading to some early sketches. So you can see this unfolding like visualization with people working through a problem that's quite complex, and envisioning again all the way through with people. But notice they also made sure that they had the stats. They took advantage of existing data, and they also got some new data just to make sure that they knew what the community was like. So survey data was there, and they were using Stanford's 5-phase model, which is fine. And they talk about design thinking and sort of what they got out of it, and through to that process and so on and so forth. What I want you to do between today and tomorrow, because I want to spend half an hour at least tomorrow just discussing what this example teaches us about the challenges and the benefits, as they discuss about, of doing design thinking in a context like this. Yeah. So go to the Canvas site, or if you're still outside of that, there's the URL at the top. Have a skim read through this story. Look at the the images and it's a really good blog because it's real, it's recent. I know the people that were working on this as well, and it's tied to that other article, and it talks about all of the real challenges and the benefits. So it's a good case study. So let's add that to the agenda for tomorrow, in addition to finishing prototyping. So some real, and there were challenges. It's not just a happy story. Woe to go. It was a bit more complex than that, and still is complex. So, and here is and in addition, so there's that blog, and there's the actual article which I posted here. That blog tells the story in a sort of a talkable way, and this paper here by by a mix of people from IITM, IFMR, and some other people. Just take a wee while to come down. But anyway, it's there. And in that paper, they talk about socially responsible design. And they talk about what we talked about in 2011. They talk about that because Ashwin Malinga, who was working on this project, learned from me about co-design and design thinking. So there's a tie-up for me personally as well. Anyway, have a look at that, have a look at the blog. It's a good lesson on the benefits and challenges. All right. I think we're done.
So I have two questions from the paper that you put on Canvas.
Oh, yeah.
One is, what is brainstorming compared to brainstorming? And the other is, what is non-linear design thinking? What is non-linear design thinking?
I put something up.
Those papers that you had
Yeah.
put up for reading in the Canvas list.
There's quite a few there. Which ones are you
That
referring to?
was on healthcare innovation, where they said that if the thing to do is brainstorming instead of brainstorming. What is brainstorming?
Oh, you're talking about. Are you talking about this one by Roberts? Is that right?
I'm not sure. At the Duncan or Roberts.
Uh-huh. And they said what again? Sorry.
Brainstorming and not brainstorming. Both are different. What is
How do you spell the difference?
BRAINSWARMING, brainstorming.
We mean swarming. Brainstorming and brainstorming.
Oh. Oh, okay. You've got me on that. What the distinction is. Brain swarming or brainstorming. It could be just a semantic thing about the way that ideas come out. I'm having to think now. It's because swarming, which is an animal behavior, is about the way things come together, constellations as opposed to. But anyway, so that was one. I'll have to check that one myself. And what was the other question?
Non-linear design thinking.
Non-linear. Yeah. That's essentially, it's a kind of a redundant statement in a way, because design thinking is fundamentally non-linear. Who said that?
That's your paper.
In
Your paper, I remember it.
which one?
The one on meditation.
Oh, hang on. Oh, about
It mentioned as non-Stanford model.
oh, non-linear Stanford models. Yeah, okay. All right. One of the reasons we might have added that was because we're talking to education people, and a lot of them don't know. So, how can I put this? When you're talking to an audience that doesn't know things, sometimes you have to be more redundant with language and spell it out. So, the fact that design thinking is fundamentally non-linear, you know if you know, but if you don't come from outside, and you listen and you look at what some of the work that's out there is, you might assume that there's a linear approach to design thinking. So we might have said in that chapter, I can't remember the exact thing, we might have said non-linear just to stress something to an audience that didn't know. I have to look at this, quite again. I think also that's partly in the Stanford model. See, the problem with the Stanford model is it goes empathize. It goes across. There are 5 stages, and they go in a direction. And they reach an end. You have these empathize, ideate, develop. I can't remember now. Edict is the sort of acronym. So it does give the impression of going in a sequence, in a linear sequence. The benefit of the idea metaphor of 3 spaces is it goes round in circles. It goes round and it keeps going around. The other one goes across and stops. So, yeah, the way we talk about it, so depends, So I tend to choose the IDEO model when I'm teaching as opposed to the standard model, just because of that impression. One seems to go beginning to end, finish, dot, 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 you go through it. The other one goes, and there's spaces, space, space, and it keeps going. It's a better metaphor. Right. Okay, I'll turn this on.
Yes, I'm stopping here.